Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing Sonic Generations for the 3DS in light of recently beating Sonic Forces and hearing a ton of criticisms against that game, especially the fact that Classic Sonic has returned in light of Sonic Mania releasing just a few weeks before, and the gimmick of Classic and Modern Sonic in the same game sort of wearing out its welcome in Sonic Generations. So, let's see what all the hubbub is about. It's a rather simple process trying to describe the general theme of Sonic Generations. Basically, it was released to celebrate Sonic's 20th birthday. And so as a result, they took about, I think it was 7 levels from Sonic's history, from his Genesis days all the way to Sonic Colors for the Wii. And then they would put a classic act and a modern act. So the classic acts, well, do I really even need to describe them? You play as Sonic's pot-bellied design from the Sega Genesis days. You get the old boy sound effects. You have to do a regular spin dash, jump onto a spring pad instead of walking into it. It feels about as close as you can get to the Genesis days, and prior to Sonic Mania being out, we thought, well, I guess this is the true Sonic the Hedgehog 4 that we're going to get. And the music really does a great job of bringing back that old Genesis-style flair. In the stages that were actually classic to begin with, they have just slight remakes of the theme with maybe just a little bit more percussion in the Green Hill Zone, for example. And then, for stages that were originally modern, they might keep the lyrics but have like ring sounds or the old-fashioned jump effects thrown in there, or just have it seem more of a slow-paced, controlled style, because classic Sonic was never about sheer speed. There were certainly times when that would happen, but classic Sonic also relied a lot on precise platforming, and that's certainly the case here. Some of the later stages can be a bit of a nuisance, especially Radical Highway. But overall, for the most part, Classic Sonic is a lot of fun to play, and definitely the highlight of Sonic Generations. The second act of each level is where you play as Modern Sonic. Now, because this is on the 3DS, it's not quite the same formula as Sonic Unleashed or Sonic Forces, where Sonic, moves in 3D space, but is still basically on a linear line, blasting through enemies as fast as possible, homing onto everything in sight. This is more like what you would get if you took the Sonic Rush titles and the DS version of Sonic Colors and spruced it up, added stereoscopic 3D, and put him in familiar places instead of new locations. Modern Sonic can perform tricks in the air, not very many, but a few. He can also grind, do the homing attack, and typically his stages have a lot more gimmicks, like the Green Hill Zone might have falling totem poles and grinding rails, and the Mushroom Hill Zone has a section where you're like inside a cave and jumping from grind rail to grind rail. Very rarely do you get into true 3D sections in the modern Sonic stages, but for the 3DS it really doesn't matter, because that way they can focus more of like being closer to the classic Sonic formula that I think most people like. They're still side-scrolling, they're just faster and have more boosting, more voice acting, more things going on. And the rockin' remixes of classic Genesis tunes are, oh so spectacular. And the remixes of the modern Sonic stages are pretty cool too, even if they're not particularly inspired. There are a handful of other things that keep this game interesting besides on a gameplay level. The game has a pretty minimalistic story that is kind of convoluted, but at least it strips down to the basics, and at least it's pretty fun to see Sonic interact with himself. Also, because the Sonic games have gone onto too much of a horrible trend saying Dr. Eggman, it's really nice that near the end of the game they throw in a Dr. Robotnik gag to sort of remind people, hey guys, the first Puyo Puyo game in North America was not called Dr. Eggman's Mean Bee Machine, it was Robotnik's. So yeah, I am always going to call him Robotnik. Eggman just is wrong on so many levels. There are bonus missions that you can find. It's got a very interesting structure where you can actually unlock the missions faster by using play coins. And most of the missions give you an additional song to add to your soundtrack player, which you can listen to pretty much any tune from throughout Sonic's history. You've got Sonic Boom, Supersonic Racing, Green Hill Zone. You pretty much name it and they have it. So it's essentially like sort of the Super Smash Bros. Equivalent, or the Sonic the Hedgehog equivalent of cramming so many fan service songs into a Super Smash Bros. Game. There's also bonus stages that involve Sonic moving along a 3D pipe and collecting as many spheres as possible so that he can get to the Chaos Emerald. Fans of Sonic Heroes might recognize these and groan in frustration, but you'll be glad to know that these are significantly easier to control. I personally never played Sonic Heroes, but I did play Sonic 2, and the stages where those take place in a half corkscrew are pretty fun. So to see them in a full corkscrew, especially with the amazing usage of stereoscopic 3D to make it look like Sonic was gradually getting closer to the Emerald, was masterful, and I found these stages to be a blast. Sonic Generations has one big flaw that prevents this from being a timeless classic, and that's it's way too short. You could probably breeze through the main game in about 2 hours, and really, the only thing even giving it any kind of longevity is the extra challenges. But once you're done with that, it's like there's not really any trophies or stuff like that. If there is, I kind of forgot about it because it's such a mundane addition to the list. It's a good game. It's a lot of fun when you first play it, but once you're consistently S-ranking Green Hill Zone and you have like the levels memorized like the back of your hand, it kind of loses its luster after a while. But if you want to see why Classic Sonic just happened to appear out of nowhere in Sonic Forces and why they're such a big deal, try to pick up this game. And even though I don't normally like to talk about other versions of the game on a Nintendo channel, I do want to briefly say that this is a completely separate game than its console brethren. I did actually play about half of the 360 version, believe it or not, and I found it to be the vastly inferior choice. Not only was it way more of like the Sonic Forces style of gameplay, but harder and more frustrating, but it also had a much more convoluted story, and there were these side missions that didn't actually... They would be too much like what plagued other 3D Sonics. Like you'd have a treasure hunting mission where you'd have to dig into the ground, or you'd have like really frustrating 3D controls that made jumping onto platforms a chore. Visually speaking, they were stunning, but gameplay-wise, I would definitely recommend the 3DS version, especially if you like the get-to-the-point storyline that doesn't over-rely on characters that have well overstayed their welcome in the Sonic universe. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.